This is the FCO course. It's June 2015, Part 16, Reimbursables and Interagency Agreements. So Congress has placed all these new restrictions on how we can reprogram the money, which Joe will talk about. But some money doesn't need to follow all those rules because it really isn't our money. It has other rules. Reimbursable Authority will tell you all about it right now. Ralph is on.
Hi again, Ralph Ferguson from Region 6. This was the actual Skills Marketplace project that I volunteered for, and I got volunteered into the ULO tool. So this was my main goal. Who in here actually deals with reimbursables and interagency agreements? So a few of you all. So this will be beneficial, trust me. All right, we're going to go into the background. We're going to talk a little bit about funds in, funds out, the new IA policy, which unfortunately has not been signed yet. Roles and responsibilities, the list of statutory authorities involving IAs, indirect cost rates, and OGC legal opinion. Okay, so reimbursables. They're nothing more than an agreement between federal entities. It actually can be an agreement with a non-federal entity. Depending on who the agreement is with is what type of agreement you'll have. The most common is the interagency agreement. And this presentation focuses on that because the new policy that's coming out is going to focus on the interagency agreements. You also have your intergovernmental agreements. So that's between feds and state, local government. You have your CRADA, Cooperative Research and Development Agreements. And I learned about this. I didn't even realize this happened. We actually get money for royalties for things that we create and the people outside of the government use. It's awesome, right? Intergovernmental Personnel Act, those are IPAs. But as I mentioned, we're going to focus on interagency agreements. Superfund state contracts and special accounts. Those are mainly, if I'm not mistaken, in the regions. I actually manage both of these within my region. And that's the special account, that's when those PRPs pay their fines for doing bad things to the environment. And then the Superfund state contracts is TR1 funding. So yeah, it's mainly in the regions. Okay, so what I did for this presentation is I basically coordinated with ISIC, West, Tony Fournier, Cincinnati.
What's ISIC?
ISIC.
It's the service center that deals with interagency agreements out in Seattle. And
then there's ISIC East, but I didn't contact anybody there because I didn't know them. So it's ISIC West and Cincinnati Finance Center, and I kind of built some stuff on my own based on the policy. So there was a lot of coordination. If any of you or anybody you know went to the budget technical workshop, Carol Getz and Michelle Angel did a presentation during that, and so this is kind of a caveat from that, and it covers a lot more than just the Finance Center. So let's talk about funds in IAs. That's actually bringing money in from different agencies. FEMA is a big one. Matter of fact, we just got one because of, which was why I'm happy I'm in DC, because Texas is flooding right now. We got one from FEMA. That's an interagency agreement, and we activated our emergency response. So those actually start, and I'm giving you this information because these are important if you ever are doing research on IAs. So they start with RW 61, then the agency, that's the agency code. 92 is actually the ISIC office, and then 3695, and then the next sequential number in IGMS. So if you ever wanted to know, because I didn't know when I first started at the EPA, what are those crazy numbers that they're putting out there? Well, there you go. It's just been explained to you, right? So funds out IAs, those actually start with DW, so those are disbursements, and they're broken out the same way that the funds in IAs are. Learn something new, right? Okay, so why the new policy? There was an IA lean event that was conducted. Jeannie Conklin, I think, was the head of it. She was the lean project manager. And so it was a coordinated effort between all the Region 5, 10, Cincinnati Finance Center, ISSIC West, and Office of Grants and Debarment. So all of the major players were involved in this to create this new process. Well, if anybody's ever done an IA, you know that it takes a very long time, right? When they started the process, it was 9.5 days to get an IA started. Well, guess what? Through the lien event, they've changed it, 3.8 days. The biggest reason why it was taking so long is because people didn't know how to get an IA done. So they would send it forward, and then it gets sent back, and you'd play the old game of, is this right? They say no, it comes back, you know. Not fun. They were able to reduce it to 3.8 days. So that was a success for lien, right? The steps, there was 67 steps to create an IA. That's ridiculous. They got it down to 41. And one of the biggest things, thank you, OCFO, was the reservation process in Compass. Okay, so they standardized and streamlined the indirect cost calculation. Who knows about indirect costs for IAs? Well, you're going to learn about it today. Okay, and they did some enhancements to CBOR and CDW. You can look up your agreements in CDW. You can create reports in CBOR. I actually have a reimbursable report in CBOR that I created and comes to me on a daily basis, so I can see all of the IAs within my region. All right, unfortunately, sign date of the new IA policy is to be determined. Last I heard, Adam told me that OHR sent it back, or is going to send it back with comments, not sure what. So the new policy establishes responsibilities and procedures by role. And I think the old policy didn't do a very good job of that, and the old policy was pretty old. So you got your project officers, fund control officers, IA specialists, and the Cincinnati Finance Center. And these are just how the steps of the IA work. There's this fancy diagram that the lien group created to kind of walk you through that process so you can see. And I'll post that to the SharePoint site. There is a SharePoint site for the IAs. There's a lot of stuff that I'm going to be posting out there. So if you want some information on IAs, feel free to go out there. It's under construction right now, so you may not find. So first things first, you're establishing it. You're completing the work. You're doing billing, pre-closeout, and closeout. And we'll kind of get into that as I'm going through the roles and responsibilities. All right, program office and program budget office. I grouped these two together because they work hand in hand, and with the new reservation process, you really need to involve your program budget office, because any interagency agreements that are being created, you should let them know. Don't. In the past, even within my region, how I found out that an IA was created was my report that showed up in the morning. You know, and that was a big thing with the comptrollers, and so they changed that, and the new policy changes a lot of the process. So you're going to be doing the IA package. If you're the program office, don't ask the program budget office to do that. They're just going to do the RF document. Trust me, they'll tell you no. You're going to do the negotiation of the project period. You need to make sure that you're choosing correct allowance holder and responsibility centers. Don't get creative with them and try to create a separate one. Try to keep in line with the work that you're doing and the responsibility center that's doing it. And you're going to need to identify your PRC, your program results code. Before you send the package, now you have to make sure that the RF has been entered into Compass. I did this Adobe Connect live version that's on the SharePoint that walks you through it. I did it with the new Compass because I had access, so I need to go update it because new Compass isn't coming out until January. So if you ever wanted to see how to do an RF document, you can go out there.
But I need to interrupt for just a minute. Just yesterday, Kelly, where's Kelly? Kelly, we can't see. Kelly received an award for putting this together, this whole RF process. So thank you very much, Kelly. Good job, Kelly.
And I give Kelly a shout out in my Adobe Connect session. Because it is a great, her explanation, you can basically use it, and I had no problems following it. I actually used it when I recorded the live session for that. Okay, and you're going to actually be assisting the IA project officer in completing your fiscal information, because let's be honest, most of your project officers don't know anything about appropriations. Communication. All throughout this process, there's the need for communication. The biggest problems with IAs is the lack of communication. So in the policy, it tells, you'll see communication a lot in there. And it gives you the different points of contact. So now you're going to know, who do I contact if I'm in this particular stage? I'm in the billing stage. Who am I going to contact? Well, if you're in the billing stage, you might not want to contact ISIC. Call Cincinnati Finance Center, right? Because they're both going to be dealing with that. Now, you could probably call ISIC, and then they're going to tell you to call CFC. Okay, so fund codes. Very important when you're choosing your fund codes for your reimbursable agreements, right? Or your IAs, I should say. When we deal with FEMA, we use fund code BR. Depending on when the project ends is your choosing of the budget fiscal year. So if you had something that's ending this year, you would choose 14-15, right? If you had something that's going to go beyond this year, you're going to choose 15-16. Why? Because 14-15 is going to expire this year, even though if the project's not expiring, it's better to choose that one than to have to get Cincinnati to do the whole rollover thing. Does anybody have any questions on choosing these? We're good? And if you choose the wrong one, someone will let you know. Okay, so the Compass reservation process. And we're still talking about program office, program budget responsibilities. So there's Kelly's, I didn't put her name in this one though. SOP created in September 24. It streamlined the process. And it's a step-by-step. So if your program budget office doesn't know how to do it, give them the document. And there's also the live Adobe Connect session that I do a narrative to walk you through if you want to see a cool video. Everything's posted to SharePoint, and so that's where you're seeing that reservation process demo. I'll be posting that there, and you can just log in and take a look. All right, so let's talk about the Grants Office Service Center. Once they receive all of your package, hopefully it's correct, they're going to review it. And if it's wrong, guess what? They're going to send it back. But hopefully you are in contact with them. You can work it out. A lot of times you can get stuff corrected if you have a good relationship with them. So make nice with the Grants Office and the Service Center. They're going to contact Cincinnati Finance Center for the reimbursable account number. Now, I talked with CFC, and they will create a line of accounting within 24 hours, but 72 hours to get it sent back. There's a process for that. So don't, unless it's an emergency response. I've got them to do one in an hour for an emergency response. But in regular routine business, it does take a little bit of time. They don't do it immediately. So don't call Cincinnati if you send a routine IA and say, hey, where's my account number? They're not going to give it to you. They're actually going to ensure that your statutory authority, and I have a laundry list of statutory authorities. It's going to be posted to the SharePoint site. It is also part of the IA policy that tells you what statutory authority you should be using. And they're also going to assign the IA number and sign it. And don't sign an IA, because we had that happen in our region. Somebody signed, and we got in trouble. It was my ARA. He wasn't happy. So here's the 1610-1. As you can see, there's where the grant number is going to be assigned by the grants office. And you're just basically going to go through here and fill out all the necessary information. Be as descriptive as possible so that you don't get those phone calls for questions. And there you go. Down at the bottom there, 21, you're going to put in your fiscal information or your financial information. Don't guess. Contact your FCO.
So let me stop here. Most of you are FCOs. One of the issues when we had the lien was that we had FCO community representation, and they said, well, they were left out of the process. Just like Ralph said, he found out about his interagency agreement by looking at his report. And we said, well, we have to be sure to do something to get the FCOs involved. So your folks should be coming to you for the account data, unless you say, well, I'm not really doing reimbursable, so it doesn't matter to me. Well, you might. There might come a time. That's why we're looking for you to pay attention and put this in your heads and, oh, let me go back to this. They're going to look for me an account number. You're going to need to know, do I use BR? Do I use TR? What stuff do I use? And we want you to understand how that data goes in the system. So if you haven't been paying attention so far, now's the time to start.
And so the plan is, by the way, beyond this, we're going to actually do some training after the IA policy that we're going to spread the word and make sure that all of the shareholders are involved and everybody understands, because that's been an ongoing issue. So let's talk about the Cincinnati Finance Center. Carol Getz is awesome. She gave me a lot of information. She was very helpful. They're going to give you the reimbursable account number. They're also maintaining financial information. They're the ones that are paying the bills. So like I said, if you have a billing question, contact Cincinnati Finance Center. They have a whole office that deals with that. Molly Williams, and I think she has like 5 or 6 people on her staff. And they each handle different ones. So you may get shifted around if you ever call there, but someone will be able to help you. They reconcile and compass. So they're doing a reconciliation. It doesn't absolve you from doing your own reconciliation, because in the end, if you're not matching with Cincinnati Finance Center, it's going to become an issue. So make sure you're doing it. They also verify closeout balances. So that's part of that whole reconciliation process. It's a team effort when you're trying to close out IAs. Don't expect Cincinnati to do it all for you, because you have firsthand knowledge of what's going on with those. They're just seeing numbers. Okay, so straight from Cincinnati, they wanted me to put this slide on there. Important items to support federal IAs. You need that signed funding document from the other agency that you're doing it with. You got to have all the information, vendor number, identification number, which is the MIPR number, Military Interdepartmental Purchase Request. Yes, I used to work for DOD, that's why I know that. Agency location code, treasury account symbol, your DUNS number, which is Data Universal Numbering System, and a billing address. So all of that information is on the MIPR. If it's not on there, you need to contact them and make sure that they put it on there, because this is the requirement that Cincinnati will need to process it. So, and then if you got non-federal IAs, you actually need billing address with POC and prepayment. So apparently we don't trust the non-federal people. Okay, monitoring and reconciling. This is, Carol Getz did a print screen of how to do all of these, and this is available on the SharePoint site. Well, will be available on the SharePoint site. So if you want to do some research, depending on, you can look at expenditures, bills and collections. You can even see how they're distributing your indirects. You just need to know the SV number. And you can find how to find your agreements in Compass, which it is quite difficult if you've never done it. You have to go deep into the heart of Compass. And then some CBOR reports. So Carol shared all that, and I'll put that on the SharePoint site. All right, we've left them out for some while. What does OB do for us, right? They actually request reimbursable authority every year. So if you've ever received that email towards the end of the fiscal year, it says, what do you expect to spend on reimbursables and IAs for the next year? Well, there's a reason why they're asking that, because they're going to go ahead and request it from OMB, so that when the new year starts, we'll have that authority to process IAs. They're also approving your reprogrammings for offsetting collections. I do these in my region. Those are your DRP documents. You probably don't do them here, but there's a process to get some of those funds within our region. So if you don't work on any of that, you probably will never see it.
So Ralph, how responsive are we in approving your reprogrammings?
Well, because I'm a nuisance, and I think Allison can attest to that, usually a day or two.
Well, that is great turnaround. Way
Yeah,
to
it
go,
is.
budget. Yeah.
I
Okay.
never have to wait. It's awesome. The turnaround is very quick. I help them out and send them a print screen to say, hey, I'm waiting for approval, so they can see it.
And Ralph, I'll process that one you sent me a day or two ago. I'm on it. Maybe it was a bucket. I'm not sure.
She's been busy attending the class or participating.
Yeah, I did that pretty late at night, too. Okay, so bringing it all home, here's the process.
Before you start, there will be a exercise on this right after lunch, so you might want to pay attention. And it's a tough one, too. It's going to tax your brains.
Here we are starting in first, and we're just kind of working around clockwise. You got EPA requesting reimbursable authority from OMB, so that's the first thing that happens. You know, that'll happen before the start of the fiscal year. And then somebody decides, like the Coast Guard or FEMA, that they want EPA to do some work. So they ask us, and then the project officer is going to negotiate. There's a negotiation process between the two because you got to determine what you're going to do, how much it's going to cost, and how long. There's that process. And then once that's established, they're going to tell the FCO, hey, we need reimbursable authority, and that's when the FCO is going to process that RF document. Once they do that, the other agency will send their reimbursable paperwork to the program office. And then the program office, if they're nice, they're going to share it with everybody so that the budget office and other offices are aware of it. Then the PO, the project officer in the program office, is going to review and approve the package, prepare the 1610, and then they're going to send it to the service center along with the RF document. So they'll need that print screen from the RF document. The Grant Service Center in Seattle, which is ISSIC West, approves the package, and then they assign the IA number. So I'm still going. Cincinnati Finance Center, they're going to give it that unique account number. Once they receive the agreement, they're going to enter it into Compass. And there is a process for that. So it takes them a little while to do it. It's not instant. The program office, FCO, then verifies the transaction in CDW or through the reimbursable agreement inquiry or via Compass in the project cost agreement query. That's instant. So don't use CBOR if you're trying to research a reimbursable agreement because it won't show up probably until the next day. And then last, you can start spending. You'll get that OR code that's different from all of your normal OR codes, and then you'll be able to spend. Any questions about that process?
Can you just go over, I guess, step number 6, when you mentioned that the project officer and the program office reviews? Yes, that one. Can you go over that one? I just missed what you said.
They're going to get the agreement from it'll likely be a MIPR. So they're going to review that whole package. Sometimes the MIPR will come with supporting documentation of whatever the work's going to be. They might put a scope of work in there and just some information. QIPRA is a big one that we use, Coastal Water Protection Restoration Act. There's another R in there. I don't know what the other R is. But they'll send us a MIPR, and then there'll be a budget associated to that. So all of those documents, before you actually do your 1610, you need to review that because you want it you want to make sure, and yes, EPA uses a secondary document to process a reimbursable that comes in. So you're taking that MIPR and creating a secondary document for the service center, and you're just taking most of the data. You may not use all of it, but you're taking most of the data from the MIPR and putting it on the IA.
Thank you.
Thank you. From the Form 1610 that was up there on the screen was a paper copy.
Yes, sir.
Is there a plan to integrate this into the IGMS at some point so that it's electronic?
That I do not know. Because that's an OGD-driven system, I believe. Yeah, so unfortunately, I don't know. I can say that that's an archaic system too, and it's going to need some, it needs some updates, but I don't know because I don't,
We'll see if we can follow up at lunchtime.
we can definitely find out.
Thank you.
Okay, so the list of statutory authorities was just revised. That'll be part of the policy, as I mentioned. It gives you the statute purpose, a type of IA, and then the parties involved. Talks about funding. So you'll get all that provided in the funds policy once it's, or the IA policy once it's signed. I cannot tell you when exactly it'll be signed. So one of the biggest things is indirect waivers. I asked the question because I had heard that there was a process. Somebody said that you can actually, there is a formal process for requesting indirect waivers. And then I contacted Alan Ang, and he said, no, there is no formal process. You can ask, but they're getting a lot more stringent with this, and they're not allowing waivers as much. So if you want to, you can ask for a waiver, but don't be surprised if you don't get it.
So let me add to that why that's important. When we have an indirect agreement or an agreement with another agency and they're reimbursing us for our work, and generally if we're going out and cleaning up something, doing an environment or whatever we would do as an agency to help out, I do some work, Cincinnati does some work, and that would be called overhead. So the question will be, why would we do work that we don't get reimbursed for? And that's why we'd be pretty rare doing waivers, because if we're doing extra work, using our FTE, our hours for another agency, we need that other agency to reimburse us for our costs. So that's why that's important.
And the program office doesn't like indirects, but the program budget office does. Okay, so interagency agreements have an indirect cost, and it's basically like Richard explained, it's the cost of doing business for your overhead that's not covered under the IA directly. So fiscal year 2015 and beyond memo came out September 30, 2014, and those are the most current rates. So that also will be on the SharePoint site. But most of this information can be found on the OGD website. They got a great website that has all of the policies, all the rates. And so if you ever need that information, you can go directly out there. Okay, so here's the rates. And you can find your office in there. There's headquarters and program, and then the regions. And so basically, Alan Ang, who's this super accountant, has a process for doing this. And unless you're an accountant or you have really strong managerial accounting skills, don't try to figure this out. Because it is, he does it according to some long, lengthy documents, but he is following the process. It has been audited. And the reason why you're seeing the different numbers is because some of the headquarters offices aren't doing as much as the programs, and then the regions are. So these are current as of fiscal year 2015. They get updated as needed. It is a process for them to do it. And as you can see the little footnote at the bottom, so it's based on total RIPIO expenditures less general and administrative costs. So if you were billing, and it's based on billing. So what happens when you do an interagency agreement, Cincinnati takes a piece off the top. And it's in a different org code. So if you got $100,000, they would take that percentage off the top. So you really wouldn't get $100,000. And that needs to be factored in when you're doing your coordinating with the other agency. Because if you don't factor that in and you tell them you need $100,000 and this is going to be taken for indirects, you're not getting $100,000. So some of the other agencies aren't very happy about it. QIPRA is one of them. The Corps of Engineers, they don't like the fact that we do indirects, but it's life. They'll have to live with it. So these are all the percentages, and then there is another percentage applied to that. And this is how the indirect costs are distributed based on those percentages. And this was my one typo and I can't believe I didn't see it, and it was too late to fix it. The bottom one is actually the regions should say programs. So my bad. So OCFO gets 28.42%, OARM gets 17.5%, and then the regions get 54%, because they're the ones doing most of the work for regional IAs. So it makes sense, right, that they would be the ones to get most of the indirects. To kind of put this in perspective, how this works. So as you can see, I'm going to take you into the mind of an accountant, because that's what I am. If you can read this, so this is my chicken scratch, right? What I did was I took OSWR, and OSWR's percentage is 19.74%. So $100,000, they would take out $19,740. And here's how it spreads out. OCFO is going to get $3,810. OARM is going to get $2,345. And OSWR is going to get $13,585. This doesn't happen immediately. This is based on billing, so they'll continue to do this until the whole IA is closed out. So that's how that calculation works, if you ever wanted to see how it's computed. So you'll know, kind of get an idea of what you're going to get back in indirect costs. Does anybody have any questions about indirects? All right, so here is the methodology. Alan Ng gave me this, so I'm not going to read it. It's just available for you if you really want to see what the process is. It's good information. I literally did not know anything about indirect rates coming here, and we kept asking the question, and we were just asking the wrong people, and we finally got the answer. And so here's some more on the methodology. I'm giving you Alan Ng's number, but don't call him. Because, well, you can call him if you want, but he's the one that processes this. So if you had any direct questions that aren't answered in this explanation, feel free. But, all right, so the OGC legal opinion. There was an issue with indirect cost rates. Basically what was happening was OGC determined that the way we were processing the indirect cost rates was incorrect, and so they told us to fix ourselves. And what this means is now Cincinnati Finance Center has the ability to apply portions of the indirect cost rates to the current year, and if it's an old IA, they have to make sure that they apply some of those indirect cost rates to those previous years. And this could mean that you're going to have expired funds that you won't be able to touch. So Cincinnati does their best ditch effort to make sure that they're posting it to the current year, but the policy states, or OGC stated, because this is their opinion, that some of it has to be charged back to the year that the IA was incurred. So before they were charging it all back, and we were just losing money. And so they went to OGC and said, can you give us an opinion on this? And it was a favorable opinion because you imagine if you had millions of dollars, because our Equipra IA is like $20 million, so the indirects is pretty substantial. Here's some of the websites you can go to if you want to do more research on IAs, direct links, and that's it. Does anybody have any questions?
I have a couple things I want to add. I'm not sure if Ralph emphasized this, but a lot of the authority we get, authority would be from where might we get the ability to do something? It might be from what kind of bills? Authorizing, thank you very much, authorizing language. The Economy Act is where we're getting most of our authority from. Also what we call the cooperative authorities, which would be CERCLA, Air, Clean Air Act, all that kind of stuff. So I'll be thinking about that. Economy Act is big. It basically means if it makes more sense monetarily, do one or the other, do it. Second thing, each RPIO gives to Cincinnati an account number. And that account number is where they get their indirect costs. Actually, Cincinnati credits that account number with the indirect costs, And that's how we actually credit the expenditures, so that money is made available to the RPIO to spend as they like. Just something good to know. I think that's it for reimbursables.